Good morning. Getting out early again today. The weather is, believe it or not, something like 58. It's a little windy, but it's a balmy wind. And it's a little overcast. It's supposed to rain. So that's my Jeffersonian weather report for the day. Otherwise, it's pleasant. There are a couple of things for us to cheer about. For those of us who care for a democratic, Republican form of government that tells us how it is as it is. I'm thinking of our president, Biden. You may recall how the Republicans were so fast to call lies what they know is the truth instead. And Biden now has the receipts, and he's made it a point of spreading them around gleefully, I would think, although he hasn't done that publicly, gleefully. But he could, because what he's done is he's circulating statements and tape-recorded statements of Republicans, leaders in the party, including Scott from Florida, who have entertained the idea of, cutting back on Social Security and Medicare, even eliminating it. In fact, one proposal is that all legislation would pass out after 5 years, and then the Congress would have to decide to renew it or not. Can you imagine, with the legion of legislation that we have, doing that? What kind of a nightmare that would be? Well, 27.3 million people heard what Biden said, and probably quite as many may have not only heard him on the day he said it at the State of the Union, but now heard in social media and other places these recorded statements of these public officials who are Republicans, who call it a lie to say they're thinking of cutting Social Security and Medicare. Shame on them. Shame, shame. And then in another victory for truth, you know about those balloons that China said was for weather? I guess in China they are concerned about what the temperature is in Montana, and they need a weather balloon for that, rather than to resort to all the public systems that exist for weather around the world, including the United States, that is not barred to China. So we have now done some original inventory on the debris from shooting down the so-called Chinese weather balloon. It turns out, not really so much. Not so much about weather, a lot more about surveillance. And there's hearings today on the Hill talking about just this. And I think it was chaired, that was a little slippery on the road there. It was chaired by the senator from Montana, which makes sense, since the weather balloon found its way to hover over Montana for an extended period of time, acting not quite like a balloon and more like a navigation device. So that's kind of interesting. Women, be afraid, and men too who should care about these things, that your daughters in Florida, if the governor has his way, they're going to be checking on your daughter's menstrual cycle. Obviously, the opposition is that's a medical problem, and that is protected, and you're not going to find out about it, and not in the civilian context. And there's a whole series of questions. Are they talking about gender identity? Are they talking about finding out whether or not a child is pregnant or not, so they want to intervene and interfere with any possible abortion? This is just 1984-ish. People isolated from the truth, from freedom, and even the language gets encumbered and is subtracted from the public discussion on the theory in 1984 that if you don't have the words for it, you can't discuss it. And it appears that DeSantis is a student of that, which is ironic because these guys are always praising Ayn Rand, and I don't think Ayn Rand would be for this. So their so-called philosophical interveners don't exist. They just have an appetite to do terrible things. So that's DeSantis. Shouldn't surprise us. And I guess he's trying to be worse than Trump. And I would hope that the Republicans choose as a nominee someone more sensible, but not able to beat Biden. The The world is also suffering from terrible natural events. I think there's something like 19,000 people, they estimate, have died in the Syrian earthquake, and that's something to be concerned about. We also have the situation in which those of us who favor electric EV cars, electric volt cars, another interesting argument for them is because they work in a two-way system. You know, they're charged in one way, but they can also discharge into a home. So in an emergency, they could EV saves homes. So instead of ET going home. Okay, so that was weak. What can I tell you? Something that's concerning is that Fetterman had a moment of dizziness, and if you may remember, it was an issue in the campaign whether the stroke he had was going to affect his performance, and so far the word is that it wasn't a stroke, but it's something to be concerned about. Demanding business politics, even if you just think of it as showing up at events. So on balance, the public war of words and of sensibility and ideology, are you for a democracy or an autocracy, continue. And it's up to us, we the people, to keep up the pressure to preserve the republic, to retain our democracy, to resist the lying SOBs on the other side of the aisle, and encourage those Republicans that remember what the grand old party was even when it merely disagreed with the Democrats. So here I am in my cathedral of trees, and I hope and expect I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.